So IndyCar have implemented a new cockpit protection device for 2019. Can you see it? Let me help you out just a little bit. There it is. IndyCar are calling this the Advanced Protection Device. It's 3 inches tall and 3/4 of an inch wide. It will begin testing on April 24th, but they are not using it until the Indianapolis 500, and then the device will be implemented the rest of the season. What's kind of fascinating is that they are not starting with this device or testing it before the season opener in St. Petersburg, and are also not going to be using it at the rounds of Circuit of the Americas, Barber Motorsports Park, and presumably, though not confirmed or denied, the IndyCar Grand Prix. And my first initial thought is, if this is a revolutionary or super important safety device, they would not be leaving it off the cars for the first 3 or 4 rounds of the season. It wasn't like last year when Formula One implemented the halo. They didn't leave it off from Australia to Azerbaijan. They went straight for the halo. They put it right on the cars, and it went through the season. Now, speaking of the halo, a lot of people, I'm sure, are going to be coming into this video. We're starting to, get into the comments and act like they're Felipe Massa or haven't even half the knowledge or experience as Felipe Massa and spouting off about the halo. The halo, originally, we thought was not being able to be used in IndyCar racing because of the fact that the top bar would restrict vision through banked corners, such as the ones found at Texas Motor Speedway and even Pocono Raceway in turns 1 and 2. Now, that being said, there was actually the article that IndyCar posted today said very specifically that they had considered adding a halo-style device to the cars. Now, what exactly that means is up to interpretation, but it's the first time IndyCar themselves, I think, have admitted to actually looking into halo devices for IndyCar racing. And it wasn't necessarily buried because it was about a 5-paragraph or a 5-line article, or maybe 10 lines, but it was a very short article is what I'm trying to get at. And it was in there plain as day. IndyCar is looking at possibly implementing some sort of a halo device. The reason they said they could not fit one to this current model of IndyCar is because simply it would not fit on the chassis. That's fascinating because once IndyCar implements a new chassis design, does that mean that there's a potential for a real McCoy halo to appear on the cars? And what's that going to do for the fan backlash? And speaking of, we're going to talk a little bit about that a bit later. But we also need to talk about the Aero Screen. Now, this is something where there was a palpable silence from IndyCar on the Aero Screen. We saw it test last at Indianapolis in the month of, or actually, yes, it was the month of May. It was very early on in the month of May. Joseph Newgarden tested the Aero Screen at speed. Earlier in the year, around February of last year, Scott Dixon tested it under the lights at Phoenix International Raceway. But we've only seen it test on track twice, and we did not see any tests at all past Newgarden's test in May. We haven't seen multi-car runs with that particular piece, and it seemed like IndyCar went from, at the beginning of 2018, looking like they may put those pieces or those devices on the cars by the end of 2018, to hearing absolutely nothing about them. Well, as it turns out, the Aero Screen apparently hasn't done too well in the crash testing. It's able to, from what I understand, able to deflect small pieces at lower speeds, but once you start getting into high impact, the kind of high impacts, I guess you could say, or larger pieces like tires or full wing assemblies, then you start having failures with the PPG, I think it's called Axicore, product. So they have had some trouble implementing that, but now we've gotten to the point where we have this, the Advance Frontal Protection piece. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I don't see, and I've seen a lot of crashes in my day, I've seen a lot of incidents, and I've had the unfortunate luck of being at the last two races, and really, as far as I know, the only two races in any kind of modern memory, for at least for IndyCar, where head protection, open cockpits have become an issue, where drivers are getting struck and getting seriously injured. That being James Hinchcliffe at the 2014 Indianapolis Grand Prix, and then, of course, Justin Wilson's fatal accident at Pocono in 2015. And looking at the vast history, and it's almost all available on YouTube, I would like someone to find me an accident where a device like this would prevent any kind of an injury or any kind of a piece of the car getting into the cockpit when the current, or what I guess is the former version of an Indy car, would not have protected a driver against that. Now, I'm more than willing to be wrong on this. And if we come to the Indy 500, the first race that it's supposedly going to be used at, and we see a crash and it deflects a tire off of the cockpit, then sure, then I think then it's absolutely worthwhile. In fact, that may be the one scenario I could see a device like this helping. I've just thought of it. Is when you see, you always see it, especially look at the crash last year with Takuma Sato at the 500, where he got into the wall and the front tire started to come back towards the cockpit. Maybe a device like this would deflect the tire away from the cockpit. So maybe that's probably the one thing I could look at and say, this device would probably help. Outside of that, and this is another thing that I've mentioned several times, we need to not have unrealistic expectations for safety devices that are implemented. There's always going to be a trade-off, and there's always going to be unforeseen either consequences or unforeseen ways drivers can get hurt, injured, and or killed. And even something like the Halo, you look at it, and it wouldn't have prevented Felipe Massa getting struck by that spring unless it absolutely went dead down the center of the cockpit, which I think in the videos it comes off to the left and strikes him. So the Halo probably wouldn't have prevented something like that. And if you look at Justin Wilson's crash, it's possible a solution like the Aero Screen wouldn't have been able to prevent that piece of the nose of Sage Karam's car from entering the cockpit and striking Wilson on the head. So it's tough because I don't want to necessarily lambast them for trying something, but at the same time, it does feel an awful lot like, and they've even admitted, I shouldn't even say it feels like it, they've admitted that this is a stopgap measure, but I'm not sure exactly what gaps it's stopping, if that makes any sense. But we had a little bit, in fact, if you paid attention to Reddit, you knew that this was happening. And this is kind of the crazy thing, because I was sent this when it happened, and I was completely skeptical of it, that this was legit at all. It seemed like total BS. But there was a post on Reddit, an anonymous guy who claimed to work for an IndyCar team that claimed that there was a device coming that had not been tested and it would be implemented at the Indianapolis 500. Now, he speculated it was going to be not pretty and, in fact, uglier than the Halo. I would hypothesize that he was wrong on that. At least from my subjective eye, I look at the car and I say it does not look as bad as a car with a Halo on it. What's interesting about this, not only did he get all this information right nearly 10 days ago, but the posts, I should say, have now been deleted from that thread on r/IndyCar. One of the other things he claimed, and you've probably already seen it because you've already read the leaked messages, is that he claimed that the lawyers, quote unquote, have gotten a hold of IndyCar racing and they demanded this change. Now, I'm going to try not to go too far into the conspiratorial things here. There's a couple of things that this could be. Three things. Number one, this guy's BSing about that. He is wildly speculating like he was, talking about how it would look, saying it would be uglier than the Halo, X, Y, and Z, all that stuff. Number two, and this I think is the most likely one, and the evidence I will state for that is because of the fact that this device is going to be first mandated at the Indianapolis 500. I think the Holman and Company got a phone call from a lawyer that they employ in Terre Haute, and that lawyer had probably been watching Formula One or maybe even tracking the progress of the Aero Screen and was unimpressed with the progress and saying, hey guys, you've got to do something here because otherwise we are opening ourselves up to be sued. And that brings me to point 3, that's a possibility where you get to talking about lawyers, is that a third party was looking at creating some sort of a class action or a civil suit or something like that, insinuating that Indy cars are unsafe because they have not implemented some form of cockpit protection while other equivalent series like Formula One have. There's all those possibilities. But again, I think the most likely one is that either someone high up in IndyCar was unhappy with the progress that the Aero Screen has been making, or someone who is able to influence folks who are high up in IndyCar made that call, and that's why we have this device fitted to the cars. Again, outside of the fact that it may prevent wheels that are already attached to the cars and coming back into the cockpit because they're tethered to the cars, keeping those elements out of the cockpit, I don't really see a whole lot of other options or other things that this could prevent. And quite frankly, you know, it's weird because it's such a half measure that one way or the other, it doesn't seem like it really makes much of a difference. And I think it's not necessarily the best PR move to do. I think IndyCar thinks they're doing the right thing here, and I hope they're proven right in doing the right thing. If it does save a driver or we see evidence of it, good thing. But at the same time, it's such a small change, and it's not really what a lot of people have been hoping and looking for, which is total cockpit protection or even closed cockpits. Are we getting to that point? Could there be a halo installed on Indy cars in the future? Unfortunately, fortunately from a safety perspective, or unfortunately from an aesthetics perspective, it's probably going to happen. And that's one more thing I want to make a point on, is that when folks have talked about this positively, they're not saying, wow, that's a great innovative device for safety. They're saying, well, that doesn't look as bad as I expected. And that's a flawed way of looking at it. And I get it. I love beautiful race cars too. But when you're talking about a safety device, the first thing I want to hear about it is not, that safety device looks really good. It's more of, what is the safety device going to do? What are the benefits of it? And there don't seem to be a whole lot of benefits, even though there aren't a whole lot of negatives either, it seems, at this point, with this device fitted to the car. I don't know. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Do you think that halos could end up in IndyCar? What do you think of the Advanced Frontal Protection device? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you indifferent to it? Probably, and if you're indifferent to it, you probably haven't gotten 10 minutes into this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, and I'll see you in the next video. Subscribe for more IndyCar and motorsport content.